So welcome everybody, obviously, to the Daniel Island Community Speaker Series. The demand for tickets, as I'm sure all of you know by now, has just been overwhelming, is the only word I can use to describe it. At times I felt sort of like I was trying to manage a Taylor Swift concert. It's Alex that's the draw here. In order to accommodate as many of you as you could, I mean, the thing sold out in just 4 days. And, you know, we've had sellouts in the past, but they typically will sell out a couple of days before the event. And as I said, this one sold out in just 4 days. So, no, if your last name started with W, you were fried before you ever got started. So, we obviously got rid of the tables to try and accommodate a few extra people. We had the club order some extra chairs, 50 extra chairs, so it looks like it's worked out about right. We got a nice full house, not too many people standing. A lot of this is just luck on how many people are going to be no-shows, but somehow it's obviously worked out pretty well. And as I said, it really is a tribute to Alex and his accomplishments. As always, I'm going to mention the 4 sponsors because it's important. We got 4 different organizations on the island that work together to put together this thing, and it's the Rotary Club of Daniel Island, of course, the Daniel Island Business Association, the Daniel Island Community Fund, and the Daniel Island Club. We've been working together in this partnership for about a decade. It's worked pretty well, and hopefully we'll continue to do this for the next decade. Let me just talk to you a little bit about some of the upcoming speakers. The next speaker series will be on April 24th. And we're going to have Dr. Tonya Matthews. Some of you may know her. She is the president and the CEO of the International African American Museum downtown. Obviously, you know, it's new. It just opened in June of last year. And I know Mary and I have gone. How many of you all have visited the African? Oh, good. We got a lot of you. Well, this half of the room was less represented. If you go, I can guarantee that you're going to thoroughly enjoy the experience. We enjoyed it. The thing, obviously, it's built on Gadsden Wharf, and that was the sort of the largest single entry point for a lot of African Americans into America. So it's kind of holy ground for, I think, the African Americans in our community. And what we found is it's not like most other museums. I mean, it tells stories. It traces these people's journey from Africa, their perilous trip across the ocean, and then their distribution not just throughout South Carolina and the South, but basically across large swaths of the nation. And it talks a lot about, you know, it tells stories about individuals, you know, the challenges they face, their will to survive. It's really very interesting, their culture. If you do go, I feel virtually certain that you will be moved by what you see and you hear at that museum. So on April 24th, Dr. Matthews is going to give us her sense of, you know, her perspective of what the museum is trying to accomplish. So hope you mark that date on your calendar. What we typically do during the summer is nothing, and you all will be off in your little mountain homes or beach homes or whatever. So then we come back and we'll meet again in September. And on September 18th, we're going to have Chris Watson, and he's going to talk about Ukraine. It turns out that Chris was a former member of our Rotary Club here on the island, and he spoke to us. He was in from Ukraine, and he spoke to us just last week. And one of our members sort of stood up at the end and said, I've been a member of Rotary for 12 years, and this is far and away the best presentation I've ever heard. Well, we have some really good speakers at our Rotary Club, so this comes as pretty high praise. So Chris is going to be joining us in September. He is intimately involved in the war effort over there. He gets munitions, transfers munitions and medical supplies to the front lines using the Ukrainian mafia. He's built a drone factory over there. Chris is kind of a techie type, so he decided he was going to start building drones. And when he came and spoke to us, he had a Russian drone and they had one from his factory. And that was really slick to see some of these things. And I guess that the important point of all that is that this war that's going on there is just unlike any other war we've ever seen. It's just not like World War II, Vietnam. It's very high tech, and you know these little tiny clones are now sort of instruments of war, and sort of anybody on the face of the planet can get one of these things at a very reasonable cost. So it's really kind of changed everything about the way wars are fought. And at the end, Chris talked to us. He said he would answer any question at all that we had about whatever it is that's going on over there. And he gave some very candid answers. And I'm sure when he comes here in September, he will give you all equally candid answers about what's going on over there. Okay, that takes care of us for down the road for the next several months in here. So now it's time to talk about tonight, and we have a very compelling story. So at this point, Evan, you want to do your thing? We're going to have a little short video, then I'll come back and give the introduction for Alex, and then he'll take over.
Now, the Taliban are out in full force. They took over the presidential palace.
You just described that as 3 of the most extraordinary weeks of your life. That's heavy, Colonel.
They're images that have shocked the world. Desperate Afghans clinging to a U.S. military plane.
You see them there, crammed into this C-17 military plane, and tens of thousands more waiting to escape.
As you know, Alex was the commanding officer of the mission to evacuate all civilian and military personnel out of Afghanistan. And he piloted the very last aircraft to leave, which means that he ended the United States' longest war. You've all seen these pictures here. The situation that he had to deal with that day and those 17 days was chaotic. It's about the only word that you can use to describe it. And he's going to obviously talk about that this evening. Just a couple of things you need to know about Alex that you may not know. Retired C-17 pilot, 22 years in the Air Force, attained the rank of colonel. Air Force Academy graduate with a master's degree in strategic leadership. And over the course of his career, he commanded multiple highly dynamic kind of organizations. He was a special assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? And in his last assignment, he was the director of C-17 Special Operations right here at Joint Base Charleston. Very impressive record. Among his many military decorations, recipient of the Air Force Academy's Sully Sullenberger Award for Courage, and the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is our nation's highest award for aerial achievement. Let me just read you something. This award is given to any member of the Armed Forces of the United States for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. It was first given to, while participating in aerial flight. This thing was first given to Charles Lindbergh in 1927. So this is a big deal. Alex is running in some pretty fast company here. Good for him. When he's obviously living here in the area, he's in Mount Pleasant, lives there with his wife and 2 kids, plays a lot of golf. When he's not playing golf, he spends his time traveling around the country as a professional speaker and leadership consultant. So let's give a very warm welcome to Alex.
Well, hey, I just want to start by saying how grateful and honored I am to be here speaking with you guys tonight. I do get an opportunity to travel a little bit and do this, travel some cool spots and share this story and talk about leadership. But if you guys don't know, Joint Base Charleston is home to the largest C-17 base in the world. And it played a tremendous role in the Afghanistan evacuation. So my part of it, compared to what this entire city put forth, very, very small. So I truly do feel blessed to be able to share this with members of my own community. So thank you again. All right, one big caveat here when we get started. This is a leadership talk, a lessons learned talk. I do recognize that what happened is a little bit politically charged, and so I'll make a deal with you. I'm gonna talk about the leadership stuff here. We're gonna get through. I do feel like we live in a time where people love to pass blame. I do believe accountability is important, but I think the most important thing is the lessons learned. One, so we know what to replicate in the future, and also so we know what not to do in the future. But the deal I'll make with you is when we get to Q&A, fire away. I'll tell you guys what I think. I'll answer all the hard questions. I'll tell you where all the bodies are buried. Okay. Well, as you saw in the video, I made that video intentionally. Starts out with sort of the chaos. There's a little break, and then some better music, and we get into the evacuation operation, the C-17. I made it that way because that's how I think of this operation. Okay, we started with chaos, crazy situation. You know, those videos do not do justice to what we saw and experienced out there. But I also believe that the military took this insane situation and in 17 days accomplished something the world has never seen. And so that's what I focus on in this conversation today. There's a couple of military axioms that some people may have heard. One is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. In the military and the Air Force, what we like to say is, flexibility is the key to air power. And I think the great philosopher Mike Tyson said it best. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, on August 15th, 2021, we got punched in the face. Kabul International Airport, Afghanistan. You can see on the north side of the field, that's the military ramp. On the south side, it's an international airport, that's the commercial side. It's very, very similar to Charleston International Airport. You guys have all seen the C-17s up there. It looks just like that. All of our chaos began with a radio call. I had just landed from what would turn out to be multiple missions in and out of Kabul. And at this moment, I was standing in our Joint Operations Center. And at the time, we had 3 C-17s on the ramp conducting what I would consider to be normal loading operations. And as I'm standing there, I hear this radio call, and it simply says this: the perimeter's been breached. There are people on the runway. Now, if you're a pilot, this is a very weird thing to hear. So naturally, all of our eyes turned towards the runway, but it wasn't just people we saw. It was a tidal wave. Before we knew it, the ramp was overrun and the aircraft surrounded. Some of the crews who were there were fortunate. They were able to get out of their jets and seek shelter in nearby buildings. Some of them not so fortunate. They had no choice but to barricade themselves in their cockpit. And over the next few days, the world would watch this scenario unfold, surprisingly mostly on Twitter. But really, for those of us who were there, the only word that I can use to describe it is chaos. I want to talk about that flight just for a second. So that was a crew from Charleston, from here. A couple of young pilots, 2 men under my command, as well as the other crew members. What happens after this video ends is the crew, surrounded by all those people, trying to figure out what they're going to do. Do they go back to parking? Do they stop? Do they shut down? Do they take off? As they're taxiing, they notice that the crew entry door keeps trying to be open. You know, something we never think about in the military, that you would have to put locks on the inside of an airplane. It's never happened to us before. Crew members are holding desperately to keep that door shut. Eventually come up with the idea to grab a cargo strap around the door and cinch it down tight so it can't be opened. Meanwhile, we brought in a couple of Apache helicopters, and they're flying really low over the crowd, dropping what we call non-lethals, flashbangs, things like that, just trying to disperse the crowd, and nothing's working. So they get out to the runway, and they decide maybe the best course of action is, hey, let's taxi down the length of the runway. Hopefully we can leave the crowd behind. You know, runway's 10,000 feet, it's 2 miles long. That airfield's at over 6,000 feet altitude. Sure enough, they get about halfway down and the crowd stops. So they keep going to the end of the runway. They turn around, they do a little bit of math, and they realize they can take off before they hit the ground. So after talking to the helicopter pilots and ensuring the aircraft was clear, they take off. And then shortly after takeoff, we find out the aircraft was not clear. And our indication is we see bodies fall. There's some more gory details that you understand why I won't show that here. Amazing, incredible situation that these folks had to go through. This was day one. How do we get from this scenario? How do we get from here to 17 days later, the success that we had? I'll tell you, I believe, having spent a little bit of time thinking about this and reminiscing on what went down, there are a few things that we can do when faced with chaos to not just hunker down and survive it, to actually find a way to thrive in it and win. And the first of these things, look, the entire thing is about leadership, okay? That's what leadership wins. Good leadership wins. And here's the first thing great leaders do. Great leaders are not afraid to break the rules, okay? Great leaders break the rules. Now, I'd like to ask everybody to take a mental step forward with me on this, okay? In the military, we hold our leaders to a very specific standard. We're never going to do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical. Everything else is a judgment call. Because no rules are always written for a reason. You guys know this. It's not possible to write a set of rules that will cover every situation you're ever going to face. Let me give you an example. C-17 normally holds 102 passengers. All right, every person in a seat, every seat with a seatbelt, this is pretty normal rule, under the normal rules. In the midst of our chaos, we did this. 830 people on this C-17. No seats, let alone seatbelts. Look, we were flying broken aircraft. We were flying more hours than we've ever flown, certainly carrying more people than we've ever carried. All of this well outside of the bounds of the rules. We did it because it's what the situation required. Now, as great leaders know, when it comes to breaking the rules, it doesn't mean you break once they're broken, you keep breaking them, right? This was the only time we flew 830 people. But we realized pretty quickly 102 wasn't going to get it done either. So we settled on a number, 450. And that became the standard for this operation. 450 people, floor loading we call it, still no seats or seat belts, sitting cross-legged Indian style on the floor of C-17s to get them out of it. And then as soon as the operation ended, what did we do with our packs? Right back to 102. Right? Great leaders understand this one simple thing. Great leaders don't obey rules. Great leaders apply judgment in the application of the rules. I know we have some high school kids here, I think. I was at the United States Air Force Academy giving this talk, and in the Q&A, there was an old Vietnam fighter pilot, and he loved it. He loved this breaking the rules. He absolutely break the rules. But he had a word of advice for the college kids there, and he phrased it this way. So to the high schoolers in the room, I'm going to give you this. All right, rules are for amateurs and beginners, and you are all beginners. File this one away, but there'll come a time in your life when this may apply. And the second thing great leaders do, especially if you're going to thrive in chaos, is you got to learn to give intent, not orders. All right, by the time this operation reached its peak, we had 80 C-17s in theater. 80. 4 times the normal amount, and 1/3 of our entire fleet was in Afghanistan. It was so hectic and so unpredictable, it wasn't possible to issue orders to each individual crew member. So instead, we simply gave what we call commander's intent. All right, this is what we said to our crews. We said, fly to Afghanistan, pick up as many people as you can, and do it as safely as possible. And then we trusted them to go get the job done. You know what happens when you give orders? People do what you say. But they don't always do what you want. I got an example of this too. We eventually got so efficient at bringing people out of Kabul that we created an enormous backlog at our main operating base, a place called Al Udeid in Qatar. It got to the point where we would land and offload our 450 people, and there was nowhere to put them. There weren't enough beds. We had, anybody who wasn't flying airplanes was busy constructing tents. We had a problem with air conditioning units. It's pretty hot out there in the Middle East. Well, I'm walking to the chow hall one of the few days I wasn't flying. Walking to the chow hall. It's so blindingly hot outside. The sun, if you've ever been there, if you've ever been in the Middle East, you know this to be true. You can't open your eyes during the day unless you have sunglasses on. It's how bright it is. How miserable it is to be outside. And I'm walking outside to the chow hall, and I hear something that stops me in my tracks. Children laughing. It was so surprising to me, I had to go investigate. And I found it, and I took this photo. If you can see this is 3 bounce houses, slides. It's a miserable time for the evacuees, obviously. But somebody came up with the idea, let's distract them, especially the kids. We have no idea how long they're going to be there. Harrowing journeys are just beginning. Let's give them a way to forget for a moment. But let me tell you something, this didn't come from some general on high issued an order. Hey, put bounce houses out there at LUB. This was solved by a low-level leader, right? Somebody had this idea and said, hey, we're going to implement this because it's the right thing to do. Because they understood they had the freedom to maneuver. I'll give you another example of this. Can you see this diagram? You're not going to be laughing in a second. By the time we were done, this diagram was on every single bathroom door on a C-17. There's no running water in Kabul. Indoor plumbing is not a thing. We're packing people full, 450 people on a C-17 who've never used one of these before. And there's just one bathroom. The nice way to say this thing's got pretty unsanitary. Who would have ever thought, with everything going on there, with what you saw in the beginning of that chaos, with the Taliban at the gates, with ISIS showing up later on, who would have ever thought this is something we would have had to have solved? And it caused some real operational problems. So here's what was happening. We would land with our 450 people, and then we'd have to sanitize the aircraft. And it was taking hours, slowing everything down. So in addition to somebody dreaming up and printing this, you know what I love to think about is one person. One person did this, right? Some person sat at their computer in Microsoft PowerPoint and made this diagram. This thing belongs in a museum, I think. This one thing. But the real solution to the sanitary problem was we brought over industrial plastic, huge rolls of industrial plastic. And on our way into Kabul, that 3-hour flight when we didn't have any passengers, we would line every horizontal surface with plastic. Pick up our people, offload them at our main operating base, and then all we have to do is rip out the plastic and get moving again. But once again, I promise you, nobody high up the chain of command came up with this solution. All right, when you give intent instead of orders to your people, you allow frontline leaders to find creative solutions to complex problems. All right, here's the third thing. Now, great leaders crave feedback. Oh, don't seek feedback, don't get feedback, put out a survey of feedback, crave feedback. So important. And if I took a poll in the room right now and said, hey, who here thinks feedback is important? Everybody said, raise their hand. I know. You get it. Feedback is important. It's important for a couple of reasons, right? One, we got to find out if what we're doing is effective. In the corporate world, a lot of times we use KPIs, key performance indicators, right? Are your inputs achieving the desired results? Can we measure it? Very obvious. Another reason feedback is important if you're a leader is you kind of want to know if you're a jerk or not, don't you? Maybe not, it's pretty hard, but you all understand that is, yes, this is why we do feedback. It's cool, okay. I bet there's one that not everybody has thought of, another reason. What if you're doing the right thing and you're getting the right results, but there are negative unintended consequences? We have a feedback system in the flying world. And at one point, about halfway through this operation, we got some very specific feedback. And it simply said this: you're pushing us too hard, someone is going to die. This is from a pilot. Obviously, this is feedback we take very seriously. But it presented the leadership with a challenge, because essentially we're trying to solve a math problem at this point. Right? We had so many people we needed to bring out of Afghanistan. We only had so many aircraft with which to do it. And we only had so many days remaining in the operation. We had to keep pushing. And the bottom line is, we were getting results. As a matter of fact, we were setting records every day with the number of people we were bringing out. But thankfully, through a feedback system, we were able to identify that everything wasn't going as planned. And so we addressed it. And we called all our pilots into a big room, everybody who was around, like this, put this feedback, just like this, up on the big screen. And we said, you're right. We are pushing you hard. But we're doing that because we trust you. I can push you this hard because I trust you to take a knee when you have to. And so with this feedback that I did, we didn't stop pushing. We didn't stop flying as much as we were doing. What we simply had was a communication gap between the leadership and the people executing the mission. And it was through feedback that allowed us to identify this. All right, I'm going to share with you guys a super embarrassing story. Just to drive this point home. Okay? About 2 years before this happened, I got moved down to Charleston and take command of one of the squadrons here. I'm a C-17 combat squadron commander. And about 2 weeks into the job, a brave young officer comes to me and he says, "Hey sir, I gotta give you some feedback." And I said, "What? I want to be a good leader?" "Yeah, lay it on me, bud." And then he hesitates. And I'm thinking, oh no. So I say, "All right, man, come into the office." I bring him into the office, shut the door, sit him down on the couch, and I say, "All right, look, I can take it, man. Lay it on me." Takes a deep breath. "Your office smells." What? Of all the things in the world I thought I was going to hear, that was not on my radar. How embarrassing it is for somebody who's supposed to be, combat leader, and I'm the smelly kid? My habit at the time was to go to the gym on my way to work. Get my workout in, shower, change, and then I was bringing my sweaty and smelly gym bag back into the office. Going to the gym is a good thing. And it was getting some positive results in my life. But very clearly there was this negative unintended consequence, only revealed through feedback. Look, if you're a leader, by the way, just a side note on this, when you get feedback like this, after the shock wears off, one question should pop into your head. Oh my gosh, what else? Look, sometimes doing the right thing yields unintended consequences. Don't be the smelly kid. Leaders crave feedback. All right, the last one here. Arguably one of the most important, and certainly one of the ones that's really important to me. Mental resiliency matters. All right, PTSD and long-term mental health issues, those are very important. And not to downplay that at all. It's not what I'm talking about. Okay? What I'm really talking about is mental toughness. Right? The ability to bounce back day after day after day. You've already seen some images of how difficult this was, right? We were flying so much. Conditions were so difficult. carrying more people, flying more hours, dealing with the unsanitary conditions. And at one point, you know, one of the aircraft bathroom I showed you, a young Afghan woman gave birth in one of those. You may have seen this headline, if not, here it is for you. You come out of Afghanistan, base that's surrounded by the Taliban. It's already been crazy. And this crew takes off, and not long after takeoff, the young woman goes into the bathroom. 2 hours into the flight, she doesn't come out. They start getting more worried. And so they knock on the door, grab an interpreter, try to figure out. Pretty soon they find out she's in labor. And so they declare an emergency, and they try to get on the ground as soon as they can, but they don't make it. I think they say it's about 800 to 1,000 feet while they're on arrival. She delivers a baby girl. The air crew's not trained for this. You know, they actually had a flight nurse on board, but she's a combat vet. She's a trauma nurse. She's never delivered a baby. Well, hot towels, hot water, nothing sanitary at all on this airplane to do this, right? This is like what you're dealing with. If you read the story, there's a really cool side note. So the C-17s go by the call sign REACH. Very often go by the call sign REACH. REACH and a number. REACH 871 was the 830 passengers. This family named their daughter REACH. Okay, so you deal with this. Our people deal with this. This is what we're dealing with while we're over there. You know, and then we had by far the lowest day we had there. The hardest day was August 26th. Okay, after dealing with all this, ISIS shows up. And on August 26th, suicide bomber detonated a suicide vest outside of what's known as Afghanistan. Killed 170 Afghans and 13 Americans. Final 13 Americans gave their life in this war. And this very next day, I found myself back on the ground in Kabul. We got an intel report that there's another suicide bomber. And then, as we're getting ready to go, I get a radio call. He's on my airplane. So we park, call security out. We try very orderly and quietly to remove people so that we can search them. You know, but I'm standing back at the aircraft amidst these hundreds of people, and I realized two things. If he's here, it's over. You know, he's not going to just give up. And second, there's nothing I can do about it. So I would guess, like a lot of people faced with something like this, I thought of my family. And right there on the ramp in Kabul, pulled out my phone, and I sent a quick text to my family group chat. I didn't want to freak them out or anything, so I just said, hey guys, I'm thinking about you. I love you. And then I put my phone away and went back to work. It worked out. I'm standing there. Okay? It worked out. You know, we can get on that jet, and now we got to fly back to our operating base. When we land, finally get a shower, get a hot meal, hit my bunk, only to realize we got to go do it all again tomorrow. Look, everybody faces. Hopefully, you're not facing something like life and death, but everybody faces something like this. If you're in corporate America, you certainly faced chaos in the last few years. Sometimes we have a hard time with our family, we have our kids, chaos stuff exists. How do you keep yourself going day after day after day? You know, I was a college athlete, and as a college athlete, I had no problem at the end of a hard practice going to the athletic trainer, get my ankle taped, or maybe sit in an ice bath after a particularly tough day. And why did I do those things? I did them so that I would be prepared to perform tomorrow. I saw treatment for any number of physical ailments. Not an issue. For some reason, when it comes to our mental ailments, we're reluctant. I know, probably like me, there's a lot of type A's in here. While we should go seek professional help, we're just not. I'm a realist. We're just not gonna do it. You know? Many reasons, but all the time. My schedule's crazy. I have a job, I have family, I got kids events. I like to play golf. When am I gonna fit that in? We're just not gonna do it. But there are things that we can do to make sure that we're ready to perform on a day-to-day basis. I was fortunate to realize this while I was over there. And there were a couple specific things I did. All right, here's one. At the end of every mission, at the end of every flight, no matter how tired we were, no matter what time it was, our entire crew went to the chow hall together. Now, eating is important, sure. And we would no doubt talk about the mission of today, maybe the mission of tomorrow, that's important as well. But that's not what it was about. It was about the people. But nobody understands what you're going through like the people you're going through it with. That little break of camaraderie and fellowship cannot be replaced. If you're a leader in any way, if you're a business leader, if you're a leader in your home, this is something you gotta take into account. Create space. Leaders have to create space for this type of fellowship. All right, the second thing I think is important to stay mentally resilient is we gotta do something that gives us a complete mental break from the thing that's causing us stress. On the night before the final mission, we get through all of our planning. Tomorrow is going to be the day that I finally fly the last aircraft out of Afghanistan. The last thing I did before I went to bed was a fantasy football draft. Most of you obviously know what this is. If you don't, it's essentially a fantasy game based on real players that gets us all overly emotional sometimes. But more significantly for me, it was about the most incongruent thing I could think of relative to what I was facing at the time. This isn't the same as scrolling on your phone or watching a movie. You have to actively engage your mind in something else. The night before the most important mission of my life, the night before our Super Bowl, I gave my mind a 2-hour ice bath so that I would be ready to perform tomorrow. But this was crazy. I mean, I still to this day don't have the words to describe what it was like being there. But I do know that chaos isn't confined to faraway battlefields. You as leaders, you can solve this. Don't be afraid to break the rules. Embrace breaking the rules, actually. Give intent, not orders. Don't be the smelly kid, create feedback. And find a way to be mentally resilient. And I promise, you're not just going to survive the chaos. You'll find a way to thrive. Thank you.
Allison would be more than happy to take some questions from you all. We only have one roving mic tonight, but if you would, wait until the mic gets to you so that, Tom, you want to head over here, so that the others can hear you, Alex can hear you, and we're taping this thing so that others. So,
Colonel, thank you very much. Of all the NATO and non-NATO allies, Qatar, Luftwaffe, RAF, who stepped up and how did they do?
I will caveat this response with the answer is going to be based on what I saw. I'm certainly not an expert in that realm. The UK is always there. Italy was there. The French might have been the smartest group. So I did an interview with French TV after this happened, and they had some interesting questions because if you know the timeline, I told you this all went down on August 15th, 16th, around that time. The French left on the 14th. What the French claim today is they had intel. They knew. The signs were there, the writing was on the wall. I don't know. In my career, I've worked with all of them, and all of our NATO allies are pretty fantastic.
Thank you so much for your service. I really applaud everything that you did. It's amazing. And I don't know how many people would be able to do what you did. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I worked on a research project on PTSD. And this is through NYU, New York University, and I interviewed several veterans who had PTSD. And one of the things that they said consistently was they were afraid to seek help because they were afraid that it would impact their careers negatively. And so as a result of that, they hid it. They didn't want to go to the VA for service, and they were trying to seek services outside of the VA system. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I think we've gotten way better at making people in the military feel like it's okay to get help. There is one exception, and it's pilots. Pilots aren't going to do it. They'll take our wings, and we know it. And a lot of us want to have future careers. We want to fly for the airlines. We won't be able to do that either. So it's a very real thing. There even was a news article very recently about sort of investigation into the number of airline pilots claiming PTSD and a fear of what that may do to their ratings. So I think that's remains a tough hurdle. One of our biggest challenges in the active duty military with mental health is there's not enough providers. So even if you want to get help, it's hard to get help.
I was just wondering how long the flights were.
It depends. The flights from Kabul to the base, to our base, it takes about, to get from here to there is like 18 hours. We weren't doing a lot of that. I did that at the very beginning. If you didn't know, Joint Base Charleston is home to our emergency alert force. We have folks right now sitting alert, meaning if the phone rings, they're airborne in 1 hour and gone. Those flights will do 18 hours direct to get over there. But for the majority of these flights, they were from Kabul to that main operating base in Qatar that I talked about. That's a 3-hour flight. But I say it depends because we had some real challenges with not just being on the ground in Kabul, but I mentioned before how hard it was at our main operating base in Qatar. So this is what was happening. We were getting there initially, and they were just overwhelmed. There literally wasn't parking spots. So our jets would land with 450 people on them, and then you would sit waiting for 2, 3, 4 hours for the parking. Imagine what this costs. I mean, put yourself in this situation. If you fly a lot of commercial, you've been here, right? You push back from the gate where you land and you're crammed in that little seat, and it's hot, and you just have a little tiny spigot of air coming out and doing nothing for you. All right, these folks are on the ground. Imagine you're there. It's not an aircraft seat. It's a hard steel floor. There's no air conditioning at all. It's 120 degrees outside. 120. People started getting a little bit violent, trying to get off of the airplanes. So we came up with a solution. Back to the giving intent and not orders. Here's what our folks did. They decided to stop landing. Just not land. We'd get overhead our destination and find out how long it was going to take to park spot open, and then enter a holding pattern. It's a 3-hour flight. The Afghans didn't know that. As long as we were airborne, everybody was happy and calm, and it was fine. And this is actually, I think, a really incredible story of our air crews and their ingenuity. I mean, we would hold, I had one time we were holding, and we started running out of gas, and they still weren't ready for us. And so we put out a call over the radio, just a blind call. Hey, are there any air refueling aircraft in the area? And we got a response. Yes, there's a KC-135 area refueler, and the guy said, we can give you about an hour's worth of gas. So we just coordinated right there on the spot, went and linked up with this tanker, did some air refueling, whatever it took for us not to land until they were ready. Long answer to your question, 3 hours, unless we decided to stay airborne first.
Colonel, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. The question is, why did they not keep the Bachman Air Base open so as to protect the perimeter?
Everybody who knows asks us this question, always. It's a tough one. I'll tell you this is what we think in the military is very split on this answer. I'll tell you what I think. Bagram was the largest air base we had over there, the largest. And had that been open when everything went down in Kabul, it would have been an amazing pressure relief valve for us to be able to operate out of there. Tons of ramp space, very secure. Here's the challenge with Bagram. It's enormous. The perimeter is enormous. We're surrounded by the Taliban. We didn't have the forces in Bagram to provide adequate security. So we would have had to bring in thousands of troops more just to plus up the security there. And on one side of it, that's politically untenable at this point. I think that's why I made the decision. But on the other side, from a personal standpoint, we're putting a lot of people at risk when we do that too. One other key point about Bagram. Bagram is home to Parwan prison. This is the Gitmo of the Middle East. It's way worse than Gitmo actually. It's the largest terrorist prison in the Middle East, Parwan prison. It's on Bagram Air Base. Securing that facility would have been challenging as well. So in hindsight, we should have kept it open. We should have done it, right? In hindsight, we wish it was open. At the time, not knowing what was going to happen in Kabul, based on that information, I think that was why the decision was made to close it.
Colonel, thank you very much for sharing your story and for all you did for the people of the U.S. and for Afghanis. Can you share how many people that were evacuated were refugees, and if you have a sense, long-term, what countries the refugees ended up in?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority came here. Overwhelming majority. I know we had some partner nations. I do not know the numbers. I just know the overwhelming majority came here. I've met many of them. If you didn't know this, we have a couple of Afghan families living right here in Charleston who were displaced here. And through many local churches, actually, this is what the nation relied on, is the local churches to partner with these families and teach them everything, right? Not only do they not speak English, that's like the smallest of the barriers they have. They don't know how to drive a car, get to work, have a job. All of these things are working on, so thank you to the community if anybody's in here who does that. I do know that to be the overwhelming sense. Did you have a question about the refugee status?
Just the amount of refugees versus...
Yeah, so we brought out 124,000. I know that's what came out. I don't know how many. I think like in the 100,000 something are here. My one comment on that is it's not enough. That we left too early, and we left a lot of them behind who deserve to be here. Okay.
Thank you, Colonel, and thank you for your service, of course. I'm very curious about two things. One, how long after things settled out, the mission was accomplished in some form or other, did you decide to leave the service? And what did you sense was the impact on active duty personnel who watched the performance of the armed forces of the United States under the direction of the President, of course? And I would value your opinion on that.
Yeah, the first one is I served for 2 more years. I came back as was still the director of C-17 Special Operations at Charleston. I finished out that tour, and I just retired in 2023. The second part of your question, see if I understand the question correctly. I think the feeling amongst the troops was everybody who was there was very proud to have been there, very proud of what they accomplished, and very frustrated by how and why we were there, and maybe some of the aftermath. I'll share the biggest frustrating point I had while we were over there. We just got done flying, and we were in the chow hall. I told you we always do that. We're in there. I think it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And Al Jazeera is on TV, the news station. Al Jazeera News is on TV. And we see the Taliban spokesman, and at this point, like, we don't know how it's going. It's not going great for us over there. We're just working every day. We're trying to hit this deadline, which many of us felt was artificial, to be out of there by August 31st. And it just doesn't, the math isn't adding up at this point, we're not gonna make it. So the Taliban spokesman comes on TV and he says, August 31st is a line in the sand, America will be gone by August 31st. Taliban. So those of us who were in there, we look at this and we say, since when does the Taliban, since when does a terrorist tell America what to do? I better wake up tomorrow morning with my leader on TV saying, thank you for your input. We'll leave when we're good and ready. I actually think this would have been very politically viable. Hey, this is what we gotta say. Hey, our goal is the 31st. We don't want to be here any longer than you want us here. We all want out, okay? But that's our goal. But make no mistake, we're not leaving until we're done. Instead, we got the opposite message the next morning. This was a significant low point for the troops. We saw the president come on, and I don't mean for this to be political, one side of the dollar or another. When we talk about our president, we don't just commander-in-chief, this is our boss. Okay, this is how I'm looking at this, my boss is on TV. And he says, we agree with the Taliban. We'll make sure we're down by the 31st. This was a punch in the gut for us. It told us two things, okay? It told us the boss doesn't have our back, and it's about to get harder before it gets easier. It was a tough day.
Thank you for the candor.
Yeah. But I will tell you, there's another side to this. Does that matter? For us, the answer is no. I'm given a job to do. Here's another talking point. I don't use it in this, it's part of a longer talk. And it's understand your AOR. In the military, we use the term AOR, area of responsibility. Okay? CENTCOM, the Middle East, is somebody's area of responsibility. Understand your area of responsibility. Am I going to go change the president's mind? No. My area of responsibility is leading those troops in Kabul. You put that out of your mind, and you go to work. And you do the best job you possibly can, given the constraints with which you've been given.
My question was not a reflection on your service.
No, I didn't think that. Yeah. It is a tough question, though. And here's the last point on that. Hey, we're a cross-section of America in the military. We all feel very differently about it. All of us felt different about it. Some people feel like that I served with, that we should still be there. Some people feel like we should have never been there. And then there's everything in between, you know. Everybody's got their own personal, I think, feelings about it.
Thank you, Colonel. What security was put into place after day one that wasn't there on day one? How did you get through 16 more days?
Yeah, so the first mission we flew, I'll back you up. I didn't get into this too much, but back to the amazing role that Joint Base Charleston plays in this. We are home to the nation's alert force. Okay, on August 14th, the Taliban hit the outskirts of Kabul. We knew it. We launched. We went over there. And our job, we have an embassy, the U.S. Embassy at Kabul International Airport. Our job was to go, we brought troops in. So we spent the first few days of that operation bringing troops in to secure the airfield, essentially from the Taliban. So a big plus up, and then we got into the evacuation. We did that for as long as we were told to do that. And then the final day and the final mission that I led, we brought out no evacuees. We only brought out American troops on that last day.
First off, thank you for your service, Colonel Pelbath. It's great to see you again.
Again, this is my friend Sean. Sean and I worked together. He's an Air Force guy. He was in my squadron under my command. You're welcome for your service.
My question, now that I'm in a position where I'm going to be a future leader as an officer, my question is, with being a part of different operations throughout your whole career, like Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Inherent Resolve, what felt different about this going into it? Was it your position as the squadron commander? Was it just like from a pilot perspective, like what was the mental preparation and how is this different from what you've experienced before?
That's a really great question. Just to be clear, you're already a leader over there. Sean's an amazing leader. He was one of my non-commissioned officers in charge of the section. He's amazing. You're already a great leader, and you're on your own path. Yeah, you nailed it. Being in command was what was different for me about this than previous times, and there's little ways. When When I got the call to launch, I was in a meeting, in the middle of a meeting, an ops meeting, you know, over at the ops house, right? And the phone rings and I have to go back to my building where I know everybody's like spinning up. And I had this thought, the minute I walk in the door, everybody's gonna be looking at me. And so I took a moment in my car, take a deep breath. I gotta walk in there, cool as cucumber, coolest guy on the planet. You know, whatever you're feeling inside, outside, everybody's gotta see that. So those got a little bit of an added pressure. Same deal when I'm flying airplanes. As the air mission commander for these operations, I'm the dude on the radio, coordinating all the air traffic, right? For that final mission, I took 5 C-17s in. We had 3 C-17s on standby. We had a bunch of fighters overhead. We had reconnaissance overhead. So like 20-something airplanes in there. Everybody's listening on the radio. You better believe I wrote down on a piece of paper everything I was about to say. When my voice comes over the radio, I am not stumbling. I'm pretty sure my radio voice is a little bit deeper too. Those are the things that I think matter, and I'll tell a little side story. I love this story because I think it's super important, and it's about my San Francisco 49ers. Super Bowl, Niners are losing, just over 2 minutes to go, and the Niners get the ball on their own 10-yard line. And the rest of this, the way this story goes is, the greatest quarterback of all time, Joe Montana, drives him down the field, throws a touchdown pass to John Taylor, and the Niners win the Super Bowl. But one of Joe Montana's offensive linemen tells this story. He says they're all in the huddle on the 10-yard line about to start this game-winning drive, and the energy is, they're like hyped, like not nervous, but they're not calm. And Joe walks into the huddle, and remember, this is his offensive lineman telling the story. And he says, Joe walks into the huddle, and the first thing he says is, "Hey, did you guys see John Candy on the sideline?" He said they couldn't believe it. Like, the team could not believe how cool this dude was. And it calmed everybody down, and they went to work. I think that's the kind of additional pressure you get when you're a leader, that people have got to do that. The calm, cool, and collected thing, like, all the time has got to happen. And then you know, hopefully you're credible and all the other things too. You know, hopefully you can actually perform. You'll just talk about it. Sean, I'm happy to talk to you anytime, bro. Anytime.
Time you go. There we go.
Go Niners.
That's right.
Once again, Colonel Seal there with you again. A question, did you have, were you able to mobilize your reserve crews as well?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there was a story not too long ago where we had a huge DFC, the Distinguished Flying Cross ceremony here at Joint Base Charleston. We ever heard about it? It was the largest one in history. Many of those crews were reservists. You know, this operation, here's the deal. If you're in the military, this is what you do professionally. Like, we train for this stuff all the time. You wanted to be there. You saw this happening on TV. You knew your brothers and sisters were there. You could not wait to volunteer to get over there. As a matter of fact, and there's plenty of people who unfortunately got jobs at home that have to help launch the airplanes, and they were very disappointed that they did not get to go. That's kind of how everybody felt. And the reserves were no different. Those guys were signing up left and right. I know you would have been there. I know you'd have been there. Yes, sir.
Colonel, thank you for your service. How do you and other members of the military go through that and come home? Not that this is reality, but you're in a fantasy world when you're over there. A real, but different than being in the United States. And so, how do you come home and reinvent yourself with your family, a career, and not have to look over your shoulder every second for a bullet or a bomb?
It's really hard. Some people do it better than others. It took me a little while to adjust when I came home. Actually, it was fine for like a month. It's interesting. You know, the first month after we get done, there's a lot of meetings about it. You know, I get called to the Pentagon. There's a huge meeting in D.C. to sort of talk about everything, the lessons learned, whatever. And so it kind of lingered. Then after about a month, it got difficult for me. And I probably had some time in there. I tried to talk about it with my wife, it didn't go well. Not anybody's fault, it's just difficult shit, you know. You don't understand if you're not there, you just don't understand. What helped me tremendously was not long after that, I do a reunion every year with a bunch of guys I deployed with a long time ago. 2012, we all deployed together. And we do this reunion every year. And the reunion occurred in September. End of September for me, it was a very fortunate time. And they were not even there with me, but they all knew exactly what to say and exactly what questions to ask. It was the most therapeutic thing that I went through. Sitting around a little fire pit with a bourbon in my hand, and all the boys just asking me all the right questions. And I can't explain what right is, except if you were there, you know what the right question is. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. And probably the biggest challenge that I have had personally, will not speak for anybody else because everybody deals with this in their own way. Things that used to be important are just not as important. And I think some of that's a good perspective. You stop sweating the small stuff, and some of that's bad. Because things that you think aren't important actually are, and it's tough. I bet anybody's ever served or gone through anything like this. Not even served, but if you've gone through trauma in your life, you probably have some sort of experience like this. So, I wish I could give you a cleaner answer, and I can only speak for myself, and it's just tough.
Thank you. Can I interject one question, and then we'll come to you, Dean. We got a bunch of students in here from Bishop England High School. How did you find your way to the Air Force Academy? That wasn't your path, as I recall.
You don't want to, this is not good for the high school kids. I wish I had like this awesome story that like this is all I want to do with my life and get there. I feel like, I'm a Christian guy, I feel like God had a plan, is really what it is, but I sort of lucked into it, okay? I got to the Air Force Academy on a wrestling scholarship. I grew up in Southern California, and here was the significant thing for me. I grew up in the town where Top Gun was filmed, the original Top Gun. But you know, I was so ignorant about everything, I didn't know that was a Navy movie. I would joke about this all the time. Top Gun is the greatest Air Force recruiting movie of all time. None of us did. So I get a call from a college wrestling coach, and he says, hey, you should come wrestle here. You know, there's no professional wrestling really, right? You're not gonna go pro in this, but if you come here, you can be a pilot. And I said, that sounds pretty cool. So I would say that's what did it. Now I'll talk to you high school kids. Okay, here's a little leadership tip for you. I heard this my whole career. Everything is about luck and timing. Lies. That's a lie. If you've heard that before, I hope you only think of this. There is no such thing as luck and timing. There is only lucky timing. Okay? We can't do anything about the timing. You can't do anything about that phone call. There's nothing I could have done to influence that coach to call me. But when he called, I was ready. And when he called, I had great grades. I had good test scores. Obviously was competing well in my sport. Air Force Academy, any of the academies, Citadel, very high academic standards. If somebody's gonna call, you better have all that other stuff done too. You take care of the luck, nothing you can do about the timing. That's what I would say. So don't believe that lie.
So, sir, you flew General Donahue out. Donahue.
General Donahue, yes.
Yes.
So, CD as he goes by.
Okay. And you know, the story was as a young captain, he went into Afghanistan right after 9/11 in 2001. But he was then the last soldier on the ground of your aircraft.
Yeah. Amazing leader. Yes.
So tell us about that. Tell us about him, what he was like, how that, what comes to mind about that specific flight and that ghostly image we've all seen in the media of the general, you know, walking onto your ramp as the last American soldier.
I know this is so mean to even tell you guys. There's a really funny story about that picture, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. But it makes me laugh, that's why I chuckled just now. I think Major General Chris Donahue, who goes by CD, is a tremendous leader. He is loved. I've met people in the Army, lower ranks, who love him. And he has a storied career in Afghanistan. and it was appropriate that he was the last boots on the ground. My experience with him was fantastic. So in the military, rank matters a lot. This guy's a major general, he's a 2-star general, and I am a lieutenant colonel. Those are worlds apart. But we both have the word commander after our name, and that carries a lot of weight. So even though I was a lieutenant colonel, as the air mission commander, I was his counterpart, and he treated me that way. And so we're flying missions in and out of Kabul. We'd fly up one day, and then the next day, I would go up to Kabul as a passenger so that I could be planning with the team, with his team, to plan for the final mission. And he always treated me so well. I go by AP in the Air Force, and he goes by CD, and so that's always what it was. And then the one thing that well, I'll tell you 2 little stories here. One memory I'll never forget. Before we launched, right, this is the final mission, okay? We're going in. Everything is time-based and conditions-based. I've got all my aircraft with engines running, ready to go, and I'm sitting in the Joint Operations Center. I'm sitting, imagine a command center is what it looks like. Just sitting waiting for the phone to ring, for the go call. And it rings. And I pick it up, and all I hear is AP, CD. Go. That was what launched the final mission. APCD, go. That was an adrenaline shot for me and pretty awesome. It was pretty fantastic. And the last story, this isn't necessarily about him, but I don't know if you guys ever heard this. We had a deadline of August 31st was the deadline that I hate. I hate the deadline. First of all, don't ever tell the bad guys your plan. That's mistake number 1. Don't put a deadline on operation, they don't know where they're gonna go. Okay, but nonetheless, we have a deadline of August 31st. So we launched this mission on August 30th. And we launch it, we do everything on what's called Zulu time. Okay, this is the universal time around the world. Well, Kabul is this weird time zone where it's 4.5 hours. The local time in Kabul is 4.5 hours different from Zulu. It's the only place I know that's got an extra 30 minutes. Okay, so we go do this mission, and we get delayed. Not anything is going terrible, but we're there way longer than we'd expected to be. I mean, this is supposed to be, highly tactical. We're flying blacked out airplanes on night vision goggles, communicating with JTACs, Joint Special Forces guys on the ground who get us in and get us out. This is the thing. This is what we do. We train for this all the time. Get in, get out. It takes hours. So we're like this, not feeling great about things. And we leave. We finally get airborne and we go home. And the next day I see the President of the United States say this on TV. We made our deadline. We took off at 11:59 p.m. local. And I was like, is that true? And I looked it up, and sure enough, that is when we took off. For me, it was like 0429 Zulu. I felt like it was total coincidence, but that was a presidential talking point that we took off right at the deadline, by accident.
I've watched the C-17s take off from Joint Base Charleston, and they seem like they're going awfully slow. Maybe a suited up for Taliban with a stinger.
Yes.
None of them got hit. How was that?
Couple reasons. We're pretty good at what we do. It's tough to see our airplanes. I mean, our tactics are based on that thing. We don't go very fast, and we're a big target. But we train in the tactical environment such that we're hard to see, and I would say minimize that threat as much as possible. The other thing is we did a really good job of eradicating a lot of those enemy weapons. So as far as I know, man-pads, you call them, man-portable air defense. Yeah, thank you. Man-portable air defense. Missiles. Shoulder-fired missiles. We did a good job of eradicating that stuff. What we did see while we were there is under night vision goggles, you'll see tracer fire pretty easily, and we saw RPGs. So going into the last mission, I was the 5th aircraft. The fourth aircraft, like right in front of us, popped flares, which is an automatic defensive maneuver from the airplane. So I didn't see the projectile going at it, but something triggered those to go off, but they didn't get hit. Either it worked or they missed or something like that. But I think mostly the reason is, you know what I'm gonna stick with? The reason that happens is we're good at our job.
second. Hold on. Bob Schreier, Rotary Club, Daniel Island. And on behalf of the club and everybody in the room, just want to thank you for a fantastic speech. You can tell it's fantastic. Nobody has left. Everybody here.
Or you're very polite.
And more than that, no fidgeting. There's no fidgeting out there. So this was truly fantastic. Hold on. It's a great thing. I have a little gift for you. This is from the club. And enjoy it. I'm supposed to tell you that there's some root deodorant in there. But this was not only informative, it was energetic, enlightening, but more important, it was provocative. So if you look at people here, they're thinking. This has been a very provocative and a fantastic speech. So thank you.